I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a return trip to one of my favorite young guests out there. He is the foreign correspondent for The New American. He has his own website, which we'll talk a little bit about at the end of this, libertysentinel.org. He's a writer for other publications like one of my favorite newspapers, The Epoch Times, and also World Net Daily, among many other ones. I'm talking about Alex Newman. Alex Newman, thanks for joining us today. Let me get over here. Come on, here, hold on. There we go. Thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thanks for having me, Greg. It's always a pleasure.
Well, you just wrote an article, if you hold up the cover story, about the New Americans. This is the New American magazine, so they're getting a nice little plug here, but you work for them, okay. What is it?
The headline of the article is "What's Really Behind the Riots," and we got a picture here of I can't tell if it's
Save
a man
a Life,
or a
Kill
woman.
a Cop, which is
Save a Life, Kill a Cop.
totally
right?
sarcastic. I know that's not what you guys think. But what is behind these? You wrote an article about it. What is behind all these riots?
Yeah, well, what we're seeing here, Greg, is a very carefully orchestrated and engineered psyop, is the term you and I were using before we went on. And that's what this is. It's a psyop of massive proportions. So what we did in this article, we break down the major groups. Well, I mean, first we point out that the whole thing is a giant lie, right? First they tell you that you're a murderer if you go out of your house for non-essential reasons and you don't care about people. Then they tell you you're a racist if you refuse to go out and protest against alleged injustice and racism and systemic racism and institutional oppression and all the rest of it. So we know they're lying to us. And then what we do in this article, we look at three of the big groups behind the riot. So you've got Black Lives Matter, which is a Marxist organization. You've got Antifa, which is a Marxist organization. And you've got the Sunrise Movement, which is basically a Rockefeller-funded front group to try to dupe a bunch of naive children indoctrinated in the public school system into joining the war on their own nation. So we look at the funding for these things, right? Obviously, Soros is big in funding Antifa and in funding Black Lives Matter. In fact, we've got documents that were hacked from George Soros's Open Society foundations showing back in 2015, they were pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into this movement for Black Lives before there even was a Black Lives Matter organization. They said they were going to create a national movement that was going to try to undermine local police. It was going to try to redistribute wealth. I mean, this is from their own documents. Then we have Antifa, of course, anti-fascist in the same sense that the Berlin Wall was an anti-fascist wall, which is actually what the mass murdering communists called it. But of course, it wasn't to keep out fascists. It was to keep the slaves in, right? And so we break all this down, and then we show you the pressure from above and the pressure from below, Greg, which is actually an old communist tactic pioneered in Czechoslovakia, whereby they could enslave a nation without even having to really fire a shot. So you have, they fund the rabble-rousers, the mob, the riots out in the street, and then that's the pressure from below. And then there's a crisis, and so you use the pressure from above, kind of like a pincer movement, to trap the population. So you get members of parliament, or in our case, Nancy Pelosi, kneeling down with a bunch of Democrats in Congress, kneeling before these demands. You get communists in the United Nations, like Michelle Bachelet, who, of course, was the socialist prime minister of Chile. Now she is the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She's an actual communist who defected to East Germany, and she's sitting up there in Geneva lecturing us, putting out press releases saying America is systematically racist. The only solution is for us to redistribute the wealth and have communism. Incredible things, but that's what this article does. And I think it completely removes the veneer of respectability from what we're seeing in our streets, Greg.
I mean, this is the nonsensical argument if you break it down to its simplest parts. It's white people have an advantage. I mean, Oprah is now out. Oh, white people have an advantage. There's white privilege. And there's systematic racism in America. And we'll fix that by having Marxism. I mean, that's the thought process. It's cuckoo. Oh, and how dare you not kneel down? How dare you not you go along with this? If you don't with Black Lives Matter, you're racist.
Yeah, well, what they've done, Greg, is actually a very clever technique on their part. They have basically defined everything that is good about Western civilization, America, individual liberty, our Constitution as white supremacy. So the church and Christianity is white supremacist. Morality, biblical morality is white supremacist. The rule of law is white supremacist. Proper grammar, even math, they said now in Seattle, is white supremacist. And so basically, if you defend any of those things, if you defend our nation, if you defend our incredible heritage of liberty, our foundation, founding fathers, our constitutional system of government, even the principles enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, which ironically led to racial equality and the abolishment of slavery all over the world. The idea that, and of course this came from the Bible, the idea that all men are created equal, the idea that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and property, and that we institute government to protect these rights. They've defined all that now, very dishonestly, by the way. The idea that civilization is only something of white people, which is a misnomer in and of itself, is inherently racist, right? And you could ask any black person who believes in these principles, you know, is it white supremacist to believe in rule of law? Is it white supremacist to believe in individual liberty and God-given rights? They'll say, no, that's crazy. But CNN, MSNBC, they've got this crazy psyop going where everything they want to tear down, Christian civilization, America, individual liberty, and our Constitution, are all white supremacists. And if you defend those things, you are a defender of white supremacy. It's an obvious lie, but if you're not thinking straight, if you've been brainwashed in a public school, hey, maybe you'll fall for it.
How do we fight back on this? Just by just understanding it and saying, we're not buying it. You're not going to call me a white supremacist because I believe in the Constitution or I believe in the Bible.
Absolutely. And I think what we need to understand here, Greg, is we are in a war. And most everyday Americans have not yet figured it out. And so we're definitely going to lose if we don't figure out we're in a war. But the other side is waging a war on us. And they're playing for all the marbles. They want to take down our nation. They want to take down our liberty. And they want to merge us into this global system that they're building. And your average everyday American who loves America and loves God and, you know, just wants to live their life and feed their family, they don't understand that we're in a war yet. So, you know, what I do is I look at Sun Tzu, one of the greatest military strategists of all time from ancient China. And he explained very clearly, if you don't know yourself and you don't know your enemy, you're going to lose every single battle, right? But if you do know yourself and you do know your enemy, you need not fear the outcome of 100 battles. And so, you know, what do we do about this? I think at a most basic level, Greg, we need to rekindle an understanding of who we are as a nation, who we are as a people. America has, in my opinion, the most incredible heritage of any nation on this planet, with the exception maybe of ancient Israel from thousands of years ago, because God, you know, ordained that they ought to be a nation. But divine providence was involved at every step of the way in creating our nation, and our founding fathers recognized that universally. They said so in the Declaration of Independence, with a firm reliance on divine providence. So we have this incredible heritage of liberty. We went up against the most powerful empire in the world, and we declared these biblical principles. All men are created equal, right? And they got all these ideas from the Bible. This is very clear. Sam Adams wrote about this when he was, you know, creating the committees of correspondence and public safety. They distilled these ideas from the Bible and created a nation out of them. And what the result was the greatest, freest, most prosperous nation in all of human history. But your average American today has no understanding of this, Greg, because they've been brainwashed and dumbed down in their public school. They've been taught fake history, and it's getting worse by the day, right? We see what they're teaching the kids in public school. And then on the flip side of that, we don't have any understanding of who our enemy is. They've got most Americans thinking the enemy is the other political party. Oh, the enemy is Trump. The enemy is the Democrat Party. The enemy is, you know, black people, white people, Jew people, Catholic people. I mean, all these phony divisions that they've created, not recognizing that the real enemy is the deep state and their real commander-in-chief is Satan, right? And so that's what we're dealing with. And until we understand ourselves, who we are as a nation and as a people, and who the enemy is, we are going to lose every battle. And we're seeing it now, right? We see it in the sports teams caving. We see it in the big companies caving. We see it in every institution in our society caving to these insane demands that we dismantle the most incredible system of government that has existed for the last 2,000 or 3,000 years. Very, very dangerous. But if we want to stop it, we've got to start with understanding who we are and who the enemy is.
You know, I wanted to go with the sports teams. You know, a year ago, I mean, it's just how quickly this changed around. I mean, a year ago, there was a couple people kneeling. I mean, Kaepernick got all kinds of grief. Now they're all kneeling at baseball, all kneeling at football, all kneeling at basketball. And this has to be pressure. I mean, you had Drew Brees come out a few months ago, oh, I'm not going to kneel. And, you know, 24 hours later, I didn't know how racist I was. I mean, you wussy. You wussy. You know, and all these people are just are doing it for a paycheck, but they're destroying professional sports. They're going to get punished. The baseball and football revenues already, viewership, because they're not in the stands. Get used to those empty stands, folks. They're way down. They've taken big hits for this. I mean, people are already revolting on this, right?
Yeah, your average mainstream American who likes to watch sports is not going to put up with this, I don't think. I never watched sports, and I haven't in my entire life. I grew up outside of America. I never watched American sports. I just happened to be in a restaurant last week in Tennessee, and they had the NBA, I guess it was, up on the screen, and you had Black Lives Matter written all over the court, and you had Black Lives Matter on all the jerseys, and you had the mandatory, oh, we got to work on ending racism and all the rest of it. You know what? America is the least racist society that I know of, and I grew up overseas. I grew up on 4 different continents in 8 different countries. America is by far the least racist society that I've ever seen. If there's one way to destroy your career, destroy your political future, it's to say something that could even be remotely construed as racist. So racism is not a big problem in the United States, nor incidentally is police brutality, right? It was a total of 9 unarmed black people who were killed by police last year. You go ask people out on the street who've been glued to CNN, oh, thousands, incalculable numbers, right? So it's all based on a lie. In fact, a police officer, and this was printed in the Wall Street Journal, is 18 times more likely to be murdered by a black man than a black man, unarmed black man, is to be killed by the police. So they've created this phony narrative, and then they got the sports teams to jump on board. I think it's going to cost them big time. I think it's going to cost the big corporations big time. I mean, like it did with Gillette, right, with the transgender advertisement. They completely destroyed their brand. Nobody who saw that ad is going to go buy a Gillette product unless there's no other alternative available. I think that's what's going to happen with these sports teams. Mainstream America doesn't want to be lectured.
Together, and hold on, let me get into it. And you think they got together, and that's what I think, because you get them all to kneel, and you think they got together and said, you will kneel to this godless Marxism. That's what it is. You're kneeling to Marxism. The people that founded this say they are trained Marxists, and they want to destroy the family. And you had actually somebody stand up and talk about that. People know what this is. They want to destroy the traditional family. They don't want mommy and daddy at home. They want trans and trans, right?
That's right. And they say that on their website. If you go to the Black Lives Matter website, what we believe, one of their points is we want to dismantle the Western-minded nuclear family, mom, dad, and children at home, right? And they want to replace it, and they say so, with the village taking care of the children. So mom can go out and do
Marxism.
Social justice work, right? It's straight Marxism. I mean, the founders of this have been very open about the fact that they're Marxist. One of them, Patrice Coulthard, went on the Real News Network and said, I'm a highly trained Marxist. We're highly trained Marxists. We're super well-versed in all these ideological theories. I mean, they sound like clowns, but you won't hear this on CNN. One of the other founders, Alicia Garza, said one of the reasons they created Black Lives Matter was to honor the legacy of Assata Shakur, a convicted terrorist, a communist cop killer who was convicted of murdering a New Jersey state trooper who was busted out of prison by Obama's buddies at the Weather Underground and then fled to communist Cuba when Fidel Castro died. Black Lives Matter said they had tremendous grief over the passing of El Comandante, right? One of the most brutal mass murdering dictators to ever walk in this hemisphere. Incredible. And it's all in the open. So how are they getting people to fall for this? How are they getting sports players to kneel? How are they getting the big companies? I think a big part of it, Greg, and why it didn't work as well before is the social isolation and the lockdowns. People are sitting at home glued to their TV, and they're not interacting with their normal people. They're not hanging out with their family. They're not going to church. They're not comparing notes with, their local community. And so they become engrossed in this fake narrative. And even if they don't believe it themselves, which most people don't, they think everybody else does. And so they're worried, oh, if I don't kneel, people are going to think I'm racist. It's insane. But I think these lockdowns that the governors, especially the Democrat governors, have ordered have been very helpful in moving this agenda forward.
Do you think it's going to work? I mean, they're forcing the teams to do it. You will kneel to godless Marxism, and that's just what it is. It's the black hole of nothingness. The Marxists say we're your God. There is no God. There is no Jesus. There is no Christ, because that's a huge lie. But do you think it's working, or do you think it's backfiring?
It's a good question, Greg, and I think it depends on what individuals and communities you're looking at. Now, Marxism is worse than just a black hole of nothingness. I mean, when you distill Marxism down to its essence, it is a complete and total repudiation of everything that God has revealed to us in his word, everything that God has written in our hearts. God, for example, is the author of private property. He said, thou shalt not steal, right? And so the Marxists say you have to abolish private property. Marxism is based on covetousness, right? You have something better than what I have, so I want to send armed men to your house to take it from you and give it to me, right? At its core, it's based on coveting other people's stuff, whereas God tells us thou shalt not covet. God is the one who created the family, mother, father, children, right? And so the Marxists tell us we have to dismantle the family. Women should be held in common. And on every single point, right, God created nations. He says multiple times in the Bible that he is the creator of nations. So what do the Marxists say? We need globalism. We need one big global governing system based on Marxism. It is a total, and when you keep reading Black Lives Matter thing, we believe in transgenderism, right? And I mean, God is the author of male and female. So they want to deconstruct everything that is true, everything that is good. And there's a very good book on this, Greg, that I encourage everybody to get, because I don't think you can understand Marxism without understanding this. It's called Marx and Satan. It was written by a Romanian pastor who spent 9 years in a communist gulag for his faith, for opposing this satanic communism. His name was Richard Wurmbrandt. And what he does is he actually goes through Marxist poetry and Marx's writings. And what he points out is Marx was not an atheist. Marx didn't just disbelieve in the existence of God. In fact, Marx understood that God was real. When you read his poetry, he actually talks to God, but he takes a position of, I hate you, and I'm going to destroy everything that you've created and everything that you've done. So if you really want to understand Marxism, if you really want to understand what these people have been convinced to kneel for, it is a total repudiation of everything good, of everything right. Now, is it going to work? Are they going to be able to convince Americans to believe this stuff? Unfortunately, I think it's been very effective so far. Now, that's not to say that everybody believes this. I would venture to say if you did an honest poll, probably most people would reject these ideas. Still, America was a very, very Christian nation. But as you go down through the generations, my generation, as an example, there's a lot of polling data on this now, Greg. Last year, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation did a survey of millennials, and they said that 70% will vote for socialists in the future by their own admission. Okay, millennials are now the first generation in America where the majority rejects Christianity. It's the first generation in American history where the majority is not Christian. So is it going to get everybody? No. There's still a very powerful opposition movement to all this. You won't see them on CNN. You might not even see them on Fox News. However, they're making progress. They're gradually wearing us down. And I think they're preparing for, the final phase in this. And we know what the final phase is, right? The FBI agent who infiltrated the leadership of the Weather Underground, which was working with communist Cuba, which was working with the Soviet Union. They explained to him, his name is Larry Grathwohl, they explained to him that ultimately, once they overthrew the system, they were going to have to intern tens of millions of Americans into re-education camps. And they were prepared, they told Larry Grathwohl, to exterminate 25 million Americans who could not or would not be re-educated. So that's where we're moving. I think it's taken them a lot longer than they expected. But the public school system, combined with the fake media, combined with the popular culture and the entertainment, is very effective. Now, whether they succeed or not, I think is still up in the air, Greg. But we have got to fight like our lives depend on it, like our liberty depends on it, like our nation, our family, our church depends on it, because it does.
That's a pretty good idea that is Marxism is a repudiation of everything God. That's really what it is. It's a repudiation. Marxism equals repudiation of God.
Yep. And by definition, it's also a repudiation of everything our founders stood for, right? Our founders, and you can read the sermons of that era, you can read their writings, they were very clear. They said, God ordained government. And the purpose of government, according to the scriptures, is to punish evil. Well, God has defined evil for us: murder, theft, rape, kidnapping. And so government exists then. And the corollary to those, if you have, if God says thou shalt not murder, you have a right to life. If God says thou shalt not steal, you have a right to private property, right? And so the reason we institute government, the founders said, is to protect these rights, to punish murder, to punish thievery, to punish these wicked things that God has defined as evil. And so when they repudiate all these things by promoting Marxism, by promoting these lies that they've now sold an entire generation of American youth on, they are dismantling the foundation of America, and they are dismantling the foundation of Christian civilization. And once the foundation is destroyed, the rest of the building will crumble. All that prosperity that these young, spoiled Americans take for granted, their iPhones and their iPads and their fancy cars and their vacations, all of that was dependent on the solid foundation that our founders laid down based on biblical principles. But as that gets destroyed, all the rest of it's going to come crashing down. And ironically, they think they're going to blame conservatives, Christians, and Trump supporters for the collapse of all that is good. So we're heading into some very dangerous times, Greg.
And if you look at what's going on in Minneapolis, I mean, they're telling people now to give up your. The cops are telling people if somebody attacks you, just hand them your keys to your car and your iPhone and your wallet and all that. And look at what's going on in Portland. I mean, I don't see how that's a vote getter. I mean, can you imagine trying to sell a house in anywhere in a 30-mile radius around Minneapolis? Could you imagine trying to sell
Values
a
are
house
plummeting.
now in Portland or Seattle?
Yep.
I mean,
And
the
they're
Democrats,
destroying these cities.
there's a percentage of Democrats that are going to vote hell no to this.
Yep, there are, and I think more and more are starting to wake up. You know, CNN tries to say, if you watch the fake media, and I don't recommend that you do, but if you watch the fake media, the spin they put on this is incredible. Oh, they're mostly peaceful protests, right? They don't show you the breaking the windows and the smashing the police cars and the beating people's heads in with baseball bats, right? They don't show you that. They say it's mostly peaceful protests, and then these mean old cops are coming and beating people down. But as this comes into your community, as you see this mob chanting and screaming and spray painting and smashing windows and throwing bricks, people say, wait a minute here. And you're right, that's not a vote getter, because even Democrats, even progressives, they want to be secure in their houses, right? They don't want bricks coming through their windows. They don't want their children hurt. They don't want their children picked on for what color their skin is. So it's not a vote getter. The real question now is, can enough people come unglued from the fake media to look around and smell the flowers and see what's actually going on? And that's what I think this is going to come down to, Greg. It goes right back to what I said. If we don't understand the enemy, what they're doing, and who we are as a people, we are going to lose this battle. And so that's going to be our challenge. And it's going to be shows like yours, Greg. You're not going to hear this stuff on any of the big TV networks. You're not going to hear it on any of the cable shows. The key now is going to be, can we get this information, this truth, out to the American people? And the one thing that we have going for us, Greg, is that it's the truth. And yeah, YouTube's trying to censor us, and the fake media is trying to censor us, and Facebook's shadow banning everybody. But the truth is still incredibly powerful. Truth can stand on its own. The lies of the establishment, the lies of the Marxists, require gazillions of dollars worth of propaganda and you know, the newspapers and the media, and still truth stands firm. So that's going to be the challenge, I think, Greg.
You know, I just been calling this thing the last few weeks. I've been trying to frame this for people, saying this is a giant psyop. I mean, now the sports teams, so you will kneel or you won't make any money. I think they're going to end up cutting all their salaries for doing this. I mean, they're going to lose so much money that they got to be able to pay these multi-million-dollar contracts in the Major League Baseball and NBA and NFL. They're not going to be able to pay this. People are going to turn it off. I haven't watched the Super Bowl in 3 years. Okay, I'm not watching the Marxists. I'm not doing it. And so, all of it in its entirety is a psyop, top to bottom. Is that right?
Absolutely. It absolutely is, Greg. In fact, we're dealing with multiple psyops right now. The manufactured hysteria around coronavirus is a psyop as well. It just came out a couple of days ago that in Palm Beach County, someone looked through the actual death rolls. A guy who got a gunshot wound to the head was listed as a coronavirus death. A lady who fell and broke her hips and died from complications from that, also listed as a coronavirus. I mean, they are manufacturing hysteria and fear and lies about racism. These are all and that's what I mean, Greg. We're in a war. A psyop is a tactic that is used in a war by military forces trying to demoralize a population. We are in a war right now. The enemy is using war tactics, including psyops, against us. You're right. It is going to result, I think, in a cratering of public support for these sports teams, but the people behind it don't care, right? And they also don't care about the issues that they're pushing, right? The issue is never the issue. The people pushing these psyops, they don't care about racism. They don't care about climate change. They don't care about any of these things. They're just issues to be used as a tactic in a war. How do I know they don't care about them? Because they have a long track record. One of the biggest financiers of this movement is George Soros. George Soros was a Nazi collaborator. He actually went on national television. You can find the clip on YouTube. They asked him, do you feel any guilt or remorse about the fact that you helped steal property from Jewish people, from your fellow Jewish people during World War II? Oh, no, I don't feel any guilt about that. The Rockefellers are another great example. They're the biggest funders of the Sunrise Movement, which is kind of like the youth wing of the stormtroopers trying to dismantle our society. Now, they were planning defund the police riots long before George Floyd was killed. The Rockefeller dynasty made all their money in oil, right? And here they are telling us that climate change is going to kill us. They also, interestingly, were the leading financiers of racial pseudoscience. They were funding the Nazi pseudoscience. They were funding Joseph Mengele, right? Do you think they suddenly grew a conscience and now they care about racism? They don't care about racism. They don't care about any of these things. They're weapons to be used in this war against the American people, against our civilization, ultimately against God. And yeah, they might destroy the sports industry in the process. All these, you know, overpaid sports players might have to take a big salary cut, but they don't care if it's an effective tool in demoralizing American people and destroying America.
And you're big on reporting on the schools, and I noticed here in North Carolina, Wake County, I'm sure many other counties, they're instituted this Black Lives Matter, and you'd read down the information. It says, and you could be an ally to Black Lives Matter, an ally to Marxism. I mean, they're indoctrinating our children into Marxism, and under the guise of, well, if you don't support Black lives, and you're a racist, and parents are falling for this crap.
Yep, they are. And, in North Carolina, actually, a couple of years ago, I reported they forced little Christian kids to stand up in front of the classroom and apologize for their Christian privilege. But this Black Lives Matter propaganda has been invading the schools for years now. I actually covered it early in 2019. The NEA, National Education Association, was pushing this into schools. Now you have the state affiliates of the NEA all pushing this into the schools. You had a principal in Vermont fired for a mild criticism of the organization Black Lives Matter, not the idea that Black Lives Matter, and I don't think anybody disagrees with that. In fact, all people are created in the image of God. The whole idea that you're black or that you're white or something, I mean, it's not even a legitimate thing, right? It's just you have a different skin tone. But it's not about Black lives. It's about promoting Marxism, and it is in all the schools now. We just reported the other day at Freedom Project, and I actually got the email from a leader in this community in the Plano School District, right? A very conservative community in a very conservative state. One of the school counselors there was sending around this Black Lives Matter propaganda to other senior officials in the school. They even had a Black Revolutionary reading list, Greg. And on this reading list, you had a guerrilla warfare manual tactics by Ernesto Che Guevara, the mass murderer who helped Fidel Castro do all the executions, who incidentally was a raging racist against black people. In fact, if you go read what I couldn't even repeat it here, but the things he had to say about black people would make you want to barf. Absolutely horrendous. How he got on a reading list of Black revolutionary stuff beats me. They also had the Green Book by the terrorist mass murderer Muammar Gaddafi. They had Black Like Mao, a book that paints Mao as the defender of oppressed black and brown people. Never mind the fact that he slaughtered 100 million Asian people, 300 million unborn babies. Never mind that they tried to exterminate the Tibetan people. Never mind that they're trying to exterminate the Uyghur people. This book makes the case that Mao is the leader of the movement for black and brown lives. Incredible stuff. They've got Lenin on there, right? The State and Revolution. They've got Karl Marx on there, the Communist Manifesto. This is the stuff they're recommending that the leading educators in this community be reading. And this is in a conservative district, in a conservative state. Just imagine what's going on if you live in New York, if you live in California, if you live in Illinois. This stuff is out of control. The way they're advancing it is through brainwashing your children. And that is, I think, Greg, the most important weapon at their disposal. Yeah, the psyops and the fake media are important, but by far the most important tool in their arsenal is the brainwashing of our children in the public school system. They've got 87% of them right now. They're succeeding with the vast majority of them, and our nation will not survive if we can. And I'll just say this last thing here, Greg, about this topic. I was so pleased to see President Trump talking about this. I'm sure you saw his speech at Mount Rushmore for Independence Day. What he said was hitting the nail right smack on the head. He said, the reason we have this mayhem in our streets is that our young people have been indoctrinated in the public school system. He said, against every law of nature and society, our schools are teaching our children to hate their country, to hate their heritage. And that's exactly what's happening. And unless and until we address that, it's going to be all downhill from here.
What do you got coming up? What's your next big article? What's coming up here on libertysentinel.org? I mean, you're kind of a guy. You write for the New American as the foreign correspondent. You travel. You're all kinds of stuff. I mean, you're a busy man, and you take your family with you, which is really cool. You got 4 kids and a wife. Maybe I shouldn't give you too much information, but you got kids and a wife, and you take them all with you, along with your speaking engagements, things like that. What's coming up for you? What's going on with libertysentinel.org?
Yeah, well, we got lots of big stuff planned. We've got a new show now, unraveling the narrative that we're rolling out, kind of looking at behind the lies of the deep state and the establishment. One of the things I'm looking at right now that I think is really significant, Greg, is the Great Reset that they're pushing. You've got the head of the UN, who's an actual Marxist, used to run the Socialist International. You've got the head of the IMF, another actual Marxist. You've got Prince Charles. You've got the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, all pushing this Great Reset agenda. So I'm going to be digging into this this in the days ahead. I'm going to stay on education, right? I've got this series going in the Epic Times. We're still promoting this rescuing our children. We've talked about it here on your show before, but this here, you know, we're trying to get as many children as possible.
Hold it up there. Hold it up there.
Yep. So if people want to get a copy of this, it's probably the most cost-effective and, in my opinion, useful tool in waking up the American people about what's happening in the public school system.
And you can get that online, too.
You can. It's at thenewamerican.com/rescuing our children. We just had a Rescuing Our Children conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee over the weekend. Phenomenal event. We had Sam Sorbo speaking. We had Tina Marie Griffin. We had incredible people. Kim Fletcher from California. We had Rebecca Friedrichs, who sued the NEA all the way up to the Supreme Court and actually won. President Trump had her into the Oval Office to discuss education. So really big things are happening on this front, Greg. We've got millions of new parents strongly considering homeschooling if they haven't started already. This could be the most important movement in terms of defeating the agenda to destroy our country. That is mass liberation of our children from the public school system. And so I'm going to stay covering that, keep working on that like a laser beam, because again, I think that's the most important front in this battle. But those are some of the things we're working on. We got lots more coming to libertysentinel.org. Investigations are working. I'll be writing up a report very soon on the Rescuing Our Children conference. I'll be posting links there if people want to watch all the videos. 2 days of just phenomenal content. We had Curtis Bowers there, who produced Agenda, talking about how to strengthen your family and how to protect your family during these crazy times. I mean, the whole overarching theme was, how can God's people protect their children from the evil that is enveloping our country, through the schools, through the entertainment media, through coming from every angle. You got the sex trafficking. So we had a state legislator there speaking on that topic. So big things happening, Greg. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about them. I hope people will, help get this information out, because I think that is the most important thing we can do right now, is educate the American people, bypass the fake media. So, share your videos. When people watch your videos, Greg, I hope they're emailing them to people on their mailing list, their family. I mean, that's the only way we're ultimately going to get the truth out to the people, and that's, I think, the only way we're going to defeat this evil, absent divine intervention.
Well, I know Jonathan Kahn was on, who they demonetized him. I'm sure they'll demonetize you, but I'm not complaining, because I don't care. I mean, I don't really care. I just want to make sure the good information gets out to good people. But you'll send. You also have a donations page. You have a snail mail address. I mean, you're a guy just hacking. You're not making it. You have a lot of jobs because you got a family and whatever, and you're not making tons of money. I'm not trying to say you're poor, but I'm not trying to say you're rich either. But so people should support your work and support what you're doing. And there's a donations page on libertysentinel.org. I'll put that up there. There's also free information on libertysentinel.org, and I'll put that up there. And also the stuff you have about rescuing your children. You'll send me a link. I'll put that up there so people can see it. Okay.
Awesome. I appreciate you so much. Thank you very much, Greg, for everything you do, for getting the truth out there. And it's always a pleasure to come on and speak with you. So thank you so much.
Alex Newman, you are hope for the future. I mean, what are you, 32 years old?
33.
33 years old. Ah, good. So that's fantastic. Alex Newman, you are the foreign correspondent for the New American. You write for Epic Times. You got libertysentinel.org. We'll put all the links up, including the donations page. Support Alex Newman. And Alex Newman, thank you for coming on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you so much, Greg, and God bless.